Imagine that you're getting ready for a night out with your girls. All right, y'all are gonna go dancing, gonna have some drinks, but all you really want to do is just dance and just get it out of your system. And you dance, you go, and you have so much fun. But at the end of the night, you can stop dancing when you get tired. Well, what if I told you that something happened a long time ago where people were dancing and could not stop? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Brandy, and I bring you strange history stories, witches, werewolves, just crazy, strange stories that I just come across. And I put some makeup on my face while I do it. So if that sounds awesome to you, please subscribe. As I am trying to build, I am a new creator. And yeah, let's go on ahead and get this party started because it's a crazy one, let me tell you. So this week we are in France, in a place called Strasbourg, France. Back then when this happened, which was in 1518, excuse me, it wasn't technically France yet. It was part of the Roman Empire, so we are really going far back in time today. But yeah, in 1518, in this little town, a woman started to dance in the middle of the street. There's no music playing. There's no festival. There is nothing going on. And her name is, I'm going to say it because I don't do French, Frau Troffea. That sounded like a question, didn't it? That's my bad. Okay, so Troffea, she started to dance, okay, in July of 1518 in her town. And she continued to dance and dance and dance and dance and keep dancing. Now, after a week of Truffaut dancing, other people started to join her. Yes, by the dozens. People started joining her in the street and they started to dance with her, okay? Now, obviously, a lot of people probably thought this was some kind of joke, that she was just maybe off or gourd or something, and so they're like, all right, let's go out there and dance. But it wasn't until they realized that once these people started to dance, they could not stop. Literally, they could not stop dancing. The only time Troffea would stop dancing is when her body would give out. 100% give out, and she would lay on the ground. She would still be convulsing in these weird manners, but her body's exhausted. And then when she had enough energy, her body made her get back up and she started dancing again. So the people joining her kind of made a nocebo effect. And no, I didn't know what that was, so I'm going to tell you guys. You may know, but I didn't know. It's when patients' expectations for a treatment cause the treatment to have a worse effect than normal. So it's almost like a a thing in your brain, basically. But these people, they all gathered with her and they all started to dance. And once people their feet started to bleed, they started having heat strokes. They started having heart attacks. People didn't think it was very funny anymore. But I'll tell you what they did. They did quite a few things to try to get this to stop, okay? Quite a few things. But people were collapsing. By August, they had 400 people dancing. She started in July, and by August, there was 400 people dancing. And at least 15 a day were dropping because they're having a heat stroke or a heart attack or stroke or whatever, but they could not stop. You're probably thinking, okay, B, like what kind of dance? Is this like a dance? It's more of a jerking motion with your arms, like convulsions almost, but it looks like dancing. It almost reminds me of strychnine because it tenses the muscles up and it makes you smile when you die. And so I thought that this might have been strychnine, but we're going to go over all what this could have been in just a little bit. But dancers were dying. They were dying. They were collapsing in the street. They were bleeding through their shoes from dancing so much. Heart attacks, strokes, all that stuff. And like I say, their movements were so spastic. It was it was insane how spastic they were. I mean, like I say, it was such like a thrashing, and they were sweating, and they were hot, and they would thrash their arms so violently, and their eyes were so vacant, and they had no expression on their face. It's just the most bizarre thing. As they were dancing, they would be crying out for help. Oh yes. They would be dancing and at the same time saying, please help me, help me, help me to stop, help me to stop. Okay. All right. So what did they do to help these people is what you're probably wondering. Well, I'm going to tell you. They did quite a few things to try to remedy this. First, the doctors said that these people had hot blood, and the best way to deal with it is to just let them keep dancing. That's the most bizarre one to me. That's probably why I said it first. Because, I'm sorry, but if people are dropping dead and they can't stop their bodies from moving, I don't think you have hot blood. I don't know what that means. When I hear hot blood, I hear like an angry person. You can feel me? It's history, but this really happened, all right? So we got 400 people dancing. Now, because the doctors are like, hey, we can cure this if they just keep on dancing. Maybe they'll dance it out of their system, basically. Okay. All these people dancing. Imagine this for a second. All these people are dancing. They cannot stop. They cannot eat. They cannot sleep. They're probably using the restroom on themselves because they have no other way, you know? I mean, it's bizarre. This whole thing is absolutely bizarre. And surprisingly, there is a lot of documentation about this. And I'm going to read to you guys a quote of what somebody said as they witnessed this event. Okay. Frau Troffea had started dancing on July 14th on a narrow cobbled street outside of her half-timbered home. As far as we can tell, she had no musical accompaniment, but simply began to dance. Some of those who witnessed her strange performance had begun to mimic her, and within days, there were more than 30 choreomaniacs were in motion, and there was some so monomaniacally that only death would have the power to intervene. This is a quote from that time, from a guy named Ned Pennant. What he observed during that time. So you got to think, you see 400 people dancing. They have no expression on their face whatsoever. They are probably doing number 1 and number 2 on themselves. They're passing out, but then when they are awake again, they're up, they're dancing, or they're having strokes. Like I said, we don't know how. In this story, we actually don't know how many people died. They had tons of historical notes from physicians, the cathedral sermons, local and regional chronicles, the papers, and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people picked up on this, so they started hearing about it from kind of like all over the world, you know? And it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't a good thing because these people were dying. But the victims definitely danced. That's what they were doing. So they brought the police in. All right. So the police were like, all right, we're going to shut this down. And they tried to stop them from dancing. And so they couldn't. They couldn't do it. And so the police were like, all right, we got to go hit up some doctors and find out what's going on with these folks. So they went and hit up some doctors. And they were like, hey, you've got to do this. You got to figure this out. So what did the doctors come up with, okay? They built halls for the dancers, okay? So they would have a place to go and dance. Now, this is what the doctors came into, letting them dance it out, because that's the only thing that they knew at the time. They had no idea. I don't have no idea how this happened. But we are going to go into some things about how it could have happened. But a single woman dancing created an outbreak of dancing, and it did not die down until September. So it went from July all the way to September. For 3 months this happened. It lasted so long that, like I said, the police got involved, and they left it with the physicians, who said they will dance themselves free of it. So they built these halls for these dancers, and they brought in musicians to make music. You know, They were like trying to do anything they can to ease these people. They even had strong men and strong women holding some of these people up so they could keep dancing, because the doctors say they need to dance it out of them. I mean, it's like putting leeches on you, you know? No. How they thought that music was going to help this situation and having people hold others up, but it did not do anything. It didn't help the situation. It completely backfired. Then they tried to ban dancing. Yes, because that's always naturally the first step, is just, yeah, tell them stop and they'll stop. I'm sure they would have stopped by now, but you know, here we are. And so, like I say, they built these halls and they were trying to get them all to go there. But what's interesting is during this time, these people believed strongly in a martyr. So the people were dancing in fear because they were in fear of the martyr Saint Vitus. Okay, evidently his punishment, if you sin, is to dance uncontrollably. Okay, I never heard of Saint Vitus, you know, so I'm learning stuff too here. You know what I mean? And so Saint Vitus or whatever, he is a saint, and so they go to his little, they have a place, you know, for him, like a building. And so they go there and they tell them to take their, you know, take the dancers there. And maybe if they keep dancing, they can appease the saint and maybe it'll stop, you know. And so so a lot of maybe some of the people were only dancing because they were in fear of Vitus and his wrath of making people dance. This could have been a psychosomatic thing, where one person does something and then all of a sudden other people start doing it and then everybody joins in. But I've never heard it be able to not stop. It's just mind-blowing. I'm still mind-blown. A lot of people were joining because they were afraid that you know, Vitus was going to get them, so they just started dancing. You know, they maybe they could stop. I don't know. Certain people probably could, but in this instance, most of them could not, and it was not a pretty sight. People were falling around down everywhere. It was awful. Okay, so they were like, these people are freaking possessed. Here we go. Right? It's got to be possession. They got to be completely psychotic. You know, it's the devil. You know. That's what they thought, which is actually kind of funny, because I don't think 400 people can be possessed. I'm not saying I don't believe in possession, because I do, but I was saying that I don't think that 400 people were possessed by a saint to make them dance. No, I do not. That's okay, because it's all part of the story, right? The council decided to ban music from the town. So not only have they banned dancing, they banned music. So yeah, maybe that'll make them stop. They ain't got nothing to dance to, even though they never started dancing to anything. They just, you know, the first girl that started dancing, she danced no music. She didn't need no music, you know what I mean? She just started dancing. So those who danced were asked to go to St. Vitus' little place, little building they had for him, you know, and they would be cleansed there, you know, by people that had divine powers, priests, and all that fun stuff, right? Well, that sounds like a good time, sure. Well, the only thing is, when they got there, they made them wear red shoes. They put crosses on the bottoms and they put crosses on the top, because they were really trying to figure out what the deal was with this. They didn't understand what the problem was and why these people couldn't stop. They also had to hold small crosses in their hands while they were dancing. So they had these red shoes on with crosses on those. They had crosses in both of their hands and painted on the tops of their shoes. And then of course the priests and stuff, they increased incense, and Latin incantations were part of this ritual to help cleanse these people of this dance. I mean, they were really trying to do everything they can. I respect that 100%, you know, I respect that. But apparently, forgiven by Vitus word was spreading as a successful ritual, and the dancing plague had ended in September, when the remaining dancers went to a mountaintop to pray. And when they came back down, they were not dancing anymore. So before we get to the how did this happen, let's talk about some similar events that actually happened too, okay? And these similar events that in the 11th century, in Coburg, Saxony, where it was believed to be a result of divine judgment. In the 15th century, Apula, Italy, a woman was bit by a tarantula, and the venom made her dance convulsively. I seriously doubt 400 people got bit by a tarantula. The only way to cure the bite back then, okay, the only way to cure the bite was to just get it out of your system, dance, which to me is not the right way, because that's actually spreading the poison a lot faster through your body. But like I say, this is the 1500s. We got to think we're in the 1500s. Now, most of those similar events were not nearly as big as the one that happened in France, the one that I'm going over today. There were a few people that were dancing and stuff like that uncontrollably, and they couldn't stop. But this case was huge, with 400 people dancing and unable to stop. So the aftermath, what's the aftermath of this? 15 died. Like 15 died almost every single day, just dropping dead from heat stroke or heart attack or just pure exhaustion. There's no total number though of deaths recorded, unfortunately, but they do know that there was it's at least into the hundreds. So hundreds of people died from dancing, and it's just absolutely. So let's go over some theories. Food poisoning. What's this food poisoning, do you ask? Well, you remember that little mushroom that we've talked about in previous videos? The ergot mushroom, the one that grows on the grain, the one that was responsible for the Salem witch trials, because it gives you delusions and it kind of contracts your muscles and things like that. So they thought that maybe it was that. But only we're in France, it's a different climate, and these people live by water. So so the way they made it sound, it doesn't sound like they're in the right kind of temperature to grow mushrooms. It's got to be very moist, like somewhere down here in the South, like that's the way I see it. So you have this mushroom that grows on rye and different grains, and if you don't get rid of that mushroom, it can poison you. And I found out something really silly about this mushroom. LSD 25 out of this mushroom. Now, I ain't never gone down that road, but I know quite a few people that have. And that's just a little bit trippy to me. It's a little bit trippy. But literally trippy. And so that's how they derived LSD, I guess, is from ergot. And yeah, it is a very, it's the ergot to mean it's the main psychoactive product of ergot fungi. And it's structurally, like I said, the same drug as, LSD, basically. Only I'm thinking they probably made it a little bit safer. I'm hoping they did anyway. And so even though LSD does provide hallucinations, and I don't know about dancing, though. Like, a lot of people would just kind of dismiss that. They didn't think that it was the ergot. I don't think it was the ergot either, because like I say, France is way more north from the equator, and it's probably not as hot there as it is closer to the equator where things grow faster. You feel me? And so, ergot just wasn't the thing. It just wasn't the thing. Plus, if you were poisoned with ergot, you would not be wanting to dance for days at a time. I'm pretty sure you'd just be like upchucking, like for real. And so, like I say, they lived by water, which is a little bit different of an area, and all that fun stuff. So maybe let's explore stress-induced mass hysteria. Now, during this time, it's kind of medieval, the Roman era, a lot of people were poor, very, very poor and starving. So they could have been under so much stress that their body just couldn't handle it anymore, and maybe that's why they started to dance so fervently, They called it an example of a fully developed case of psychogenic movement disorder, which I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up. The patient experiences neurological problems, sensory symptoms, and convulsions. That's a psychogenic movement disorder. Or it could have been mass psychogenic illness, which involves the spread of illness symptoms through a population where there is no infectious agent responsible for the contagion. The rapid spread of illness signs without being sick. So basically, it's just people that, they worry themselves to death that they're going to get sick, and then they get sick. You got to treat your mind, differently than you do anything else, because your mind controls everything. I mean, come on. And so all these could have been a cause for the bizarre behavior, but because it was spread so rapidly and so quickly, like a epidemic almost, it could have been completely psychosomatic. Most of the dancing started with people who were very sick already. They were starving, and when you're starving, it makes you do absolutely insane things for food, okay? We've all seen movies with that stuff in there. I know I get hangry, right? Yeah, we all do. And so that's what I feel like this might be a little bit of part of that. But so 7 other dancing plagues ended up happening, and they all happened during this time because, like I say, everybody was poor, nobody had anything, they had no food, they had nothing. They were just living day to day and hoping to survive. So now, that also makes me think that they could have eaten something out of the forest because they were so hungry they didn't care what it was. And then that might have been what the first girl had actually done. She had actually eaten maybe something from the forest that she wasn't supposed to, and it's just something that we don't know about yet. Something that would cause convulsions. But for it to happen to so many people in the same exact way, it has to be a psychosomatic thing. But like I say, there were 7 other dancing plagues were also reported in the same region during the medieval era, and they called it chorea. Yeah, it has a name. Chorea is a psychological illness, a situation comprising random and intricate unintentional movements that flit, that's a southern word, that flit from body part to body part, okay? So they have a name for it. It's called chorea, and it means, they basically just dance, like uncontrollably. And the way to cure it was just to keep letting them dance, even though they were bleeding through their shoes and passing out and fainting and starving to death and pooping themselves and everything else, Yeah, just keep letting them dance. That makes all the sense in the world. Also, they called it diverse choreas, which was all the dances were labeled in the Middle Ages, referring to the dancing mania that happened in Central Europe and part of during the time of the plague. And so you can also see this plague of people dumping their mess out into the street and not getting rid of it properly. That's what started the plague. And so that probably could have killed a lot of people. It could have affected them a certain way. When you throw feces in the street and pee and stuff, that's not safe for anybody. The more you inhale that stuff, I think it may have been that, I mean, there's a word for it, but I'm not going to say it. This story to me was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. I've never heard of 400 people dancing at one time. Point blank period. I have not. And it's very, very interesting to read about. And it is very, very interesting to learn that most of it they were just really, really poor people. And I think they were starving. And maybe that was their way to get the diocese, attention, maybe. Like, hey, dude, look at us. We are not doing very well. You know what I mean? We are starving, and y'all are not doing anything to help. So what can we do, So they start dancing. And then the psychosomatic thing, everybody's like, oh, it's St. Vitus. He's coming, he's going to make everybody dance. So we might as well just go ahead and start dancing. So now we've got people in there dancing that really don't need to dance, but they're dancing because they're afraid that St. Vitus is going to make them dance. Yes, these people were very superstitious back then. Very, very superstitious. There's really no other word for it, but yeah, just incredibly superstitious. So, but you know, this is definitely one of the craziest stories I've ever covered. I've never heard this before in my life. I mean, I've been to many clubs and many raves and things like that. And, you know, at the end of the night, you can stop dancing and that's a great thing. But when you can't stop and you're bleeding through your shoes, you are falling down in exhaustion, and then when your body feels like it's rested enough, you're up again. And then the doctors tell you, oh, just keep dancing. It'll dance its way out. You'll dance it away, you know. But it wasn't until they went to this mountaintop where there was a shrine and they went and prayed. And then somehow it just was all over with by September. Could it be the power of prayer? I believe in the power of prayer. I'm just saying, it could have been. It could have been the power of prayer because I know it healed my husband. That's all I gotta say about that. So, but that's the story of the 400 dancing in 1588 in France and what happened to them. I honestly don't happen. I do not know what happened to the very first lady, the one that actually started dancing. It never said. I never could find what happened to her. But she more than likely probably passed away. She was one of the first ones to start dancing and she couldn't stop. And to this day, nobody really understands why, unless you look at the psychosomatic part of it. Then that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because you see somebody doing something and then all of a sudden other people start joining in and you're like, okay, well maybe I should be doing this too. Like maybe this will make all my fears and pains and hungers go away if I just dance and dance and dance, you know. And they tried to stop them from dancing. They tried to give them accompaniment with a music, you know, with music. They had tried to have strong people hold people up so they'd keep dancing. So the doctor said keep dancing. So they had to keep them upright. But it's a sad story. It really is. It's a sad story, and we'll never really know what happened to those people. We never really will know exactly what happened and why they all acted the exact same way in these jerking, convulsing motions of a dance. That's our story for today, you guys. I'm so glad that you are here with me. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. I just really enjoy doing this so much for you guys, and I hope that y'all are enjoying it too. And if nobody's told you today, I love you. So have a wonderful weekend.